Hello and welcome back to the Azure Terraformer. Today I have a special episode for you. One of my colleagues, Matt White, or also better known as Matt FFFFF, the hex version of White. I see what he did there. It's very cool. Very cool GitHub username. But this guy is one of the rock stars of Terraform at Microsoft, building all sorts of amazing modules. And I get a chance to sit down with him on my channel on this show to learn more about him and to talk Terraform. So without further ado, let's talk to Matt. Hey, Matt. Welcome to the Azure Terraformer. It's weird to call it a show, but I think you're probably the first guest I've ever had on the show, so thanks for that. I wanted to just sit down with you because we had the chance to meet up at HashiConf this year.
We did, yeah.
And I've been following your work. As I mentioned when we met at HashiConf, I've been following your work. I feel like I know you because I get notifications every time you commit something to GitHub, which was a little creepy way to introduce myself. Like, hi, I follow all your GitHub posts. But it was really cool, like meeting up with you at HashiConf and getting to know you and hanging out with all the folks there. And just wanted to introduce you like on the channel. I'm sure they've all folks that follow my channel are familiar with your work and probably used a lot of the stuff that you and your team pump out year in, year out. But just wanted to start a conversation, get to know you a little bit better. Maybe introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your role at Microsoft.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. I'm honored to be the first guest on your show. Thank you very much for inviting me. My name is Matt White. I'm a cloud solution architect. I'm in a team at Microsoft that is lucky enough to engage and be tasked with what we call solution engineering. So this is having impact at scale for our customers and partners. And the way that I personally do that is by writing Terraform modules. So mostly writing Terraform modules. My role is in the Azure Landing Zones team and also now in the Azure Verified Modules team, for which I lead the Terraform efforts. So yeah, I'm really lucky to have this position. It's great. I really enjoy it. And I've actually, this is going to be, I was looking up before the call when you said, how long have you been at Microsoft? It's 8 years next year. So
wow,
yeah,
congrats!
A long time.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
And how did you start your career? Did you start out as dev, infra? I mean, 8 years at Microsoft. Like, did you start at Microsoft or like where did you start? And yeah.
So I'll be 44 next year. Would you believe?
We'll have to cut that from the.
Yeah, I started my IT career when I was 18, and it was only supposed to be for a year before I went to university. But then I realized, like, hey, hang on a minute, I'm earning pretty good money for an 18-year-old, and I could go to university to do computer science and physics. But actually, is it relevant to what I want to do? And what I was doing at the time was what we could probably call a second line support role, supporting NT 3.51 and NT 4 in an enterprise environment. It was for a financial institution in the UK. So yeah, I was like, this is actually, the job experience is more valuable to me than the degree at this point. So yeah, I never went to uni. So yeah, I've always continued to be on an infrastructure kind of path, although latterly I'm crossing that line more into development. So although I'm still an infrastructure guy, really, my Go skills have improved loads because I've been contributing to and writing Terraform providers and stuff. So that's been really cool to kind of start on that journey and try and do a bit more dev. But yeah, always infrastructure, a lot of automation. So I used configuration management tools like Systems Management Server, SMS, and latterly SCCM. And so yeah, automation has always been really key to what I do. So Terraform's a natural evolution of that in the cloud world, right? So yeah.
Very cool, very cool. I think we share kind of a similar start. Like I started at an internship at a financial institution and was kind of racking and stacking servers and worked with NT4, NT 3.51, I think we had. And NT4 was like, wow, NT4, this is like some hot stuff, man. It was pretty exciting back then. But yeah, that's interesting. We had similar paths there. So what brought you to Terraform? When did the Terraform bug catch you?
My first experience of it was I was actually working at Microsoft. My first role at Microsoft was in what was MCS. So I was a consultant. I was an architect actually in MCS. And I was working at a customer, and it's that classic Terraform problem that the customer was having was like, well, look, I've created some subnets in. It was actually in AWS at the time, but I've created some subnets in AWS, and then overnight they've just been all deleted. And like he was having a conversation with someone, and they were saying to him, yeah, no, it's managed by Terraform. You've got to update the Terraform. And he was like, what? I don't understand. And then that was it. I was like, oh my God, what's this thing? What's this kind of tool that we've got that can do this? And just, yeah, snowballed from there. But yeah, classic problem. I still see that today. I'm sure you do too. Like people managing stuff with Terraform and other people not managing the same stuff with Terraform. And yeah, it's always a mess, but yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The drift. And I wish like we could just like make all subscriptions read only to users.
Yeah.
And then just like,
help.
But those draconian measures are often just big revolts ensue. Right. So,
yeah.
But, so you work a lot with modules, which I have as well. What makes a good Terraform module? This is kind of like the quintessential question, right? The philosophical question we ask all Terraformers out there, right? Like, what does a module mean to you?
I think principally for me, it has to add value. It has to be doing something that's complicated or hiding complexity and is making it easy for me as the consumer of that module. An example of that is we've got a module that does multi-hub networking in Azure. So when you create multiple hub VNets, you can pair them all together, and you've got to work out what that mesh peering is. So how many peers have I got? What's paired with what? And you've also got to work out potentially routing between the hubs. So each hub might be responsible for an address space that's greater than its own virtual network. So I wrote a module that you can just say, okay, this is my hub. This is the hub's VNet's IP address, and this is the address space for which it is responsible. And here are all the other hubs, and likewise. And the module will then go and work out what peerings it needs to create, what routing tables it needs to create, and kind of that I think, I don't want to blow my own trumpet here, but that's like, I think that's useful because then I don't have to bother figuring it out. The module's done it for me, right? So I just tell it how many VNets I want and in what regions, and it goes and does the rest. So I think that example of adding value and hiding complexity is a good one. So yeah, principally that's kind of, if you're writing a module that's just classically wrapping a resource, right, then HashiCorp themselves say don't do that, right? It has to add value. It has to do something that you can't just do with a native resource.
Yeah, and that I agree, and I think that value has to be substantial in some way, encapsulating that complexity. Yeah, and it kind of like, I came from kind of an object-oriented programming background, and so it's kind of funny seeing how some of those principles of object-oriented design, play out, in designing modules with Terraform. It's hard to decide. I struggle with whether to correlate a Terraform module to a class or to like an SDK. It's kind of, it doesn't line up perfectly, but yeah, that encapsulation aspect of it is definitely a key value add of modules.
You're almost writing an interface, aren't you? That's the way I look at it. It's an interface, and actually behind the scenes you can implement the doing of that however you want, but a good module design will keep that interface consistent so that you can not have breaking changes and things like that. But that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, and that's some of the friction that I've seen, like, and with the Terraform providers being an open source project, right? Like Azure RM. Some of the things that kind of confuddle me, and like I have to, especially when I'm authoring modules, it's like I'm striving to keep the interfaces consistent, right? But then sometimes the resources and the provider themselves, like their interfaces aren't consistent. Like sometimes it wants a resource ID, sometimes it wants a name. It's
Yeah.
like, well, like, but when you're writing when you're writing a module, it's like, well, my client, like, I'm trying to shield my client, who's ever consuming my module, from the complexity of like trying to manage. Oh, I need a name here and an ID there, and so sometimes I have to decide how much I should abstract, kind of the eccentricities of the resources themselves from my module consumers, right? So I don't know.
See, with Azure, you can always get the name of the resource from the ID. So you can, if you go with the basic thing, or I can always get the resource group name from the resource ID. I can always get, so that's kind of the way I think about it. It's like, I have to do some splitting of strings and some other stuff, right? But I can always get what I need from the resource ID.
From the ID. And we don't have to embed those IDs in code, right? We can use data sources. That's one thing. I've been working a lot with Bicep, and it just seems like there's a lot of embedded GUIDs and stuff. I don't know. Have you worked with Bicep at all, or
a little? Yeah,
a little. Okay. Well, I've been having to dip my toe into that a little bit, but. So question, like, and this might be more influenced by your role at Microsoft, but do you run local or do you use pipelines?
In order to get quick feedback on development, I run local. But the automated testing, in order to merge a PR, it must pass a set of automated tests which run in a pipeline. So that's from a module development perspective. I think if you're talking about a consumer perspective, I think the only way you can do that in any kind of scale in an organization is to have a Git repo plus some automation to run that. If you're still running this on a laptop, even with a remote state file, like, I don't think it quickly becomes not scalable. So it's worth the investment in your skills if you're not familiar with CI/CD pipelines to kind of get familiar with that, because it will massively help you if you don't do that already. But there's loads of little tricks, right? Talk about local development. There's classic ones we find all the time. It's like you developing a module and you're constantly running plan, apply, and it works. And you think, cool. And then it's not until you destroy and run from the beginning that you realize you've got a dependency problem or something that's not known until after apply. So there's loads of kind of little tricks you learn along the way to not fall into those traps.
Yep. Yeah, developing modules definitely. If you put it into a pipeline, then there's just so much latency, right? It's So it's really important people have like a scratch pad in mind, like a subscription or a place like where a tagging, a scheme that they can deploy local and experiment with what they're deploying, and then before they can ship it.
There's been some really interesting developments on that front. So I think you've covered it, but there's a new feature of Terraform called Terraform Test.
I have not dug into Terraform Test. Okay. Like with your work on the Azure verified modules, like are we like grabbing the bull by the horns there? Like, are we like rolling out Terraform Tests everywhere? And what's that experience been like?
We are encouraging module authors to use Terraform Test, but because the only option really before that was to use TerraTest and use the Go language to write tests, and that to a lot of infrastructure folks just is not a skill that they have, right? So to make it more accessible, it's like, okay, well, let's write the tests in HCL, so it's a language that everyone's familiar with. And there's some really cool stuff coming in 1.7 of Terraform, which is mocking of providers. So the problem with testing is you're creating resources, and if it's virtual WAN, that takes like 20 minutes to create. So Terraform 1.7 test has got a thing where it will just mock that and say, yeah, I've done it, right? And so you can run your unit and your unit testing and other testing using mocked stuff just to prove the logic in your module, and then you can write assertions to say, there must be 7 of these, and that must be called that, and whatever. And these 2 things must be equal. So you can use all of the Terraform functions that you've got available So I think that will what I'm kind of getting at is that will really improve the kind of development loop on that. So it won't take so long to, oh, I've got to test my module. Oh no, I need to apply it. That takes 10, 15 minutes. So yeah, hopefully that'll make that much better.
Just checking. Is this mocking stuff? I've not heard about this. Is this like open to the public? Has this been announced publicly?
It's in if you look at the release notes for the 1.7 beta, you'll see in there. So I haven't tried it yet, but it looks really interesting.
Yeah. Oh yeah, wow. That sounds really really exciting actually, because there's some resources that just take a long time, take a long time, and cost a lot of money. It's like sure we can destroy, we can apply and then destroy, but like holy cow, man, like for me to run my tests, it might take an hour, but an hour on a resource that costs $5,000, a month. It's like, I don't know. Can I get this approved? So
yeah, API Management Premium, for example, right? So
that was exactly what I was thinking.
It's funny.
It's just
yeah.
So, which I still have beef about that one. API management, like the advanced. I don't know if this is still true. I got to look this up, but the advanced networking, like the ability to create private networking, I don't understand why there's a paywall for that. It doesn't seem like it would cost that much money to, I get like paying for more capacity, but like the ability to use private networking, come on guys, like throw us a bone. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you know what? I haven't haven't deployed that in a while, but yeah, it seems a bit odd. Yeah.
Cool. So, all right, we gotta hit some of these little brain busters here. What is your favorite Terraform provider that isn't Azure RM?
Well, I was thinking about this. I think, even though I want to say random because it's just so useful, but I think my favorite one is AZ API. So for those that don't know, that's the provider that Microsoft writes to deploy Azure resources. Think of it as a kind of slightly lower level provider than Azure RM. But what's really cool about it is that we've now got not only resources that we can create and destroy, but we've also got resource actions, which are basically posts, gets, whatever, right? So you can literally, it's like having curl, right, at your fingertips in Terraform. So you can literally query the Azure APIs, do whatever you want, and then bring back stuff and play with it. So one thing that we were playing with, and actually a PR that I've just had merged on the AZ API provider, is to run resource actions on destroy instead of create. So you can have an action that you like, a subscription cancellation, for example, is the scenario I was thinking of. And now Azure RM does this for you, agreed. But in scenarios where you can't use Azure RM, and there are some, it's really useful to be able to have a resource action that will cancel the sub when the subscription alias resource is deleted, because that doesn't happen normally, right? So things like that just allows you so much flexibility. So yeah, AZ API is my answer.
That's a very good Microsoft answer. I think that's corporate approved. I've not used the actions very much. Like, it almost seems like it's like another. It's like a cleaner way to do maybe local exec or something. Like you don't have to. Because I remember back in the day building CLI commands or curl commands in local exec, and you have to like get an OAuth token, to post to the REST API or something.
Yeah.
So it seems like a cleaner way of doing stuff like that, but
it handles all the auth in the same way that Azure RM does. So you can use whatever you want, and it's just anytime you're shelling out and running AZ CLI, then yeah. Don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't shell out. I like that. Don't shell out. It's a funny little play on words. Okay. What is your least favorite thing about the Azure RM provider? A little spicy.
So yeah, it's a real specific one, this, but I think it happens all over the provider, and that is we've had a problem in Azure Verified Modules where we implement private endpoints, and when you implement a private endpoint, it's got a sub resource which is called in Azure it's called a private DNS zone group, and what that does is it links up the private endpoint with a private DNS zone in order so it can manage the DNS record for that private endpoint. And the way you do that in the resource is by using a one or more blocks. So you can use a dynamic to create these blocks. It's fine. The problem is, so inside the resource, it's a block. It's not a something equals something. It's a block, so there's no equals. And that's fine. But some customers don't want to give the people that are deploying the private endpoint permissions to the private DNS zone, because you have to have that. So what they do is they use Azure Policy with deploy if not exist to do that for them, which is a great solution, because then the policy has a managed identity, it does it, and nobody needs to worry about it. The problem, though, is that the Azure RM provider sees this private DNS zone group that's been created and thinks, hang on a minute, there shouldn't be any because there is none in my config, and then deletes it. So sometimes it's a bit like there should be an option, and I'm sure if we put in a pull request, we might be able to get it merged, but there should be an option to say, like, don't be authoritative over this. If I've declared one in my config, you manage that, but don't delete all the others. So things like that just niggle me, and give me a head scratching moments. And I'm like, sometimes I'm just like, let's just use AZ API to create this because it won't have these problems. But then you're in the realms of, do you have a mixed module with Azure RM and an AZ API, or do you just say, right, I'm just going to use AZ API for the whole thing?
Yeah. Is there a way to use lifecycle policy that's like a meta argument, where you can ignore, but
so you can,
but not on blocks, maybe.
You can do it on blocks, but the lifecycle argument has to be static. So you cannot base. So what we wanted to say is have a input boolean that says, you ignore this because I'm using Azure Policy based on a variable, but you can't do that. It has to be literally a string baked into the config. It can't be unknown or based on a local or an expression or anything.
So I think I've tried that. So you can't even use like a splat expression, right? Because a dynamic block, a lot of times those are one or more, right? So it's like, I think maybe we should look and see if there's a feature request on Terraform for that. That would be nice. Like if there was like filtering, because I've ran into the same problems where there's like churn created by Azure Policy. Because at Microsoft, we have a lot of Azure policies that apply on our management groups, especially internally. And so where like I'm trying to create something, but Azure Policy comes in and does something, and I'm like, I want to keep whatever Azure Policy puts there, right? So I just want to ignore what Azure Policy does. I think managed identity is a great use case for this, right? Because a lot of times they add managed identities to whatever my services are, so that they can do whatever they need to do corporate-wise. But I need my own managed identity to apply RBAC to my stuff, right? So I'd like to ignore, their managed identity, like using some sort of filtering mechanism, but like still manage my managed identity, right? So maybe that definitely seems like there's feature built into HCL that is missing there. So
yeah, agreed. Yeah. So no, that's currently bugging me at the moment. So I'm like scratching my head on what to do with that.
Yeah, the nested blocks. Another thing that bugs me, I don't know if I'm sure you've ran into this, is like how there's some sub resources that do the same thing as the nested blocks. The best example of this is the VNet and subnets, right? Like there's a VNet subnet block, but then there's a subnet resource, right? What kind of busts my chops is the mutual exclusivity of using the VNet resource with subnet nested blocks, and then trying to go create resources separately. Like the provider is like, it doesn't know what to do. It's like, and so they just throw up their hands and be like, no, it's either one way or the other. Like you have to either do all nested subnets, or you have to do all resource blocks, and that kind of bugs me a little bit. But
I get it. It's similar to the private DNS thing, isn't it? But
yeah. Oh well. Always room for improvement, right?
Always. If it didn't change, it'd be boring, right? So yeah.
All right. Final question: what is your favorite Azure service to work with?
I don't know about service, but my favorite feature of the service, and I think it's been relatively recent, and I think it's revolutionized the way we do access control is managed identity. I think that's just the way you can go, okay, I want to provision an app service and provision a database and just give that app service permissions to that database. Like, just rather than having to have key vaults with shared secrets and all this kind of stuff, it just massively simplifies the whole thing. And actually, if I could be specific and actually pin it to a service, user assigned managed identities are particularly good because of the new federated credentials thing that you can do. So the way, like the way you can configure GitHub to authenticate to Azure using a user assigned managed identity, and all you have to do is tell it the repo name and the environment maybe that you're using in GitHub, or the branch name or whatever it is. That's really cool, because then you can use cloud-based CI/CD runners, OpenID Connect. There's no credentials, there's no shared credentials anywhere. It's awesome. So yeah, I just think that's
definitely
really cool.
gonna have to look into that, because I'm still old school, you know, and I'm plugging in client secrets into my pipeline. So I should probably fix that. Yeah. I think I was wondering what that federated, because I saw that new identity. I've been doing a lot of stuff with the Entra ID or the Azure AD provider.
Yeah.
And I saw that federated credential. I'm like, what is this new thing? Like, and why do we need that? How is it different from a service principal? I don't get it. So,
well, what's really cool is, you know, it used to, you know, if you want to create a service principal, that's a Entra ID right that you have to create a service principal. But what's really cool about user-assigned managed identities is they're ARM resources. So you can just create them. You don't have to have a separate provider. You can just create them in ARM. They behave and look like service principals, but you can configure this OpenID Connect authentication to connect you with GitHub, Azure DevOps, GitLab, Terraform Cloud. Like, they all support it. So yeah, and then you don't need any shared secrets. It's just awesome.
Oh, okay. See, I thought you'd have to. I thought you'd have to create something in Azure AD or Entra ID for the federated credential. But so you're saying a user-assigned identity can just be like it does something inside of Azure AD or Entra ID.
Yep, it creates a principal in the directory. So you see my dog.
Hey,
but it creates a principal inside the directory, just like a service principal would. But it's awesome. And for infrastructure people, it doesn't replace service principals in that if you had a web app that needed to authenticate requests on, you know, it doesn't do that. You still need a service principal if you want to do that. But if you just want to get your pipelines working, it's perfect.
Yeah, I've only used that with AKS and workload identity so far. So
Gotcha.
Yeah. Definitely, I've been doing a lot with GitHub Actions, so I definitely need to check that out. But well, anyways, thank you, Matt. And
no worries.
Should I call you Matt White or Matt FFFFF?
I was going to say, actually, I should have said at the beginning, for those that don't know, my GitHub is Matt FFFFF, Matt White. So yeah, if you've seen me on GitHub, that's me. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Oh, and I love your work. I continue to follow it, and big fan. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thanks. Love the channel. Keep doing what you're doing. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Well, that was Matt White, everybody. Terraform extraordinaire at Microsoft. If you've been working with Terraform and Azure, I'm sure you've used his stuff at one point or the other. It's great to have him on the show, and hope to have him back soon. If you like this sort of content and want to hear more from Terraform luminaries such as Matt White, please smash that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps out a lot. And make sure you check out Matt on GitHub and follow his work like I do. That's it for me. This is the Azure Terraformer, signing off.